Thanks very much, everyone, for coming. It sounds as though you can hear me, hopefully. This is my first time at VARC. Absolutely loving it so far. It's really fantastic to see so many people here, the quality of the presentations, which sets a very high standard, which I hope we can meet in this presentation. So I'll be doing the first part, looking at MPs and politics and some of the issues there in a little bit more detail. And then Katie will be talking about actually how people get involved with the Vegan Society's community network and how being involved with that network can help with that. Everyone hear me okay? I'm assuming you can. Okay, brilliant. So first of all, to introduce us. So the Vegan Society, in short, our job is to make it easier for people to go and to stay vegan. Essentially, we're here for vegans, and being here for vegans is being there for animals. Anything which is going to increase and make it easier for people to become vegan is supporting animals. And we know, of course, that people come to veganism from lots of different places. Though personally, I don't know about you, Katie, I don't know anyone in the Vegan Society who isn't there for animals at the moment. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong slide there. This is what's going to take place in the session. I was looking at this slide. It's this fancy thing which shows you the next slide here. So just taking a step back, you've probably already read that. But we're just going to talk about why it's worth talking to MPs, which is a question many people ask, what they can do, how we can optimize that by learning more about them and the way in which we engage with them. Community network, as we spoke about, looking with an example here of communications that we have, and then questions at the end via the Hoover app or in person, if that's appropriate. So this is the slide I thought I was on. What does the Vegan Society do? And a lot is obviously what you will get from this slide. Essentially, if you're vegan, if you've got any problems, we can help. We've got a huge amount of expertise within the organization on everything really related to veganism, legal issues, dietary, campaigning, policy. We do work with schools, we do legal work. It's a huge range of stuff. Everything which is really related to vegans and veganism, we have an involvement in some way. And today we're going to talk about the political engagement side, which is the team that I'm in. There were supposed to be other talks. Unfortunately, someone couldn't manage, but we have a panel session as well, which is a private session on research tomorrow. But we're just going to focus on the policy side at the moment. So, why influence your elected representatives? First thing to say, and obviously I would say this as a policy and public affairs manager, is if people say it doesn't matter about who's in government and it doesn't matter about MPs, that's not true. They really can make a difference. Who the government is makes a difference. Who your MPs are make a difference. And our ability to engage with them makes a difference for animals, which is why we're here. And you can see here these various reasons that we're talking about. First of all, gains can come from the top, wins can come from the top, but by and large, if it's not something coming from the bottom, that makes it an awful lot more difficult and longer a process in order to achieve that. We are fortunate to live in a democracy. We are fortunate to be able to influence our elected representatives. And as we'll talk about, they make the laws and they make the policy. And they are here for us. We elect them. And again, we'll address that a little bit further. And it may be, we're looking at 650 MPs. Only a very small number of those, relatively speaking, are in government, but that doesn't mean that they're powerless. And there are many things that your individual MP can do, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And these are just some examples. Incidentally, in the session this morning, we were talking, one of the speakers referred to Denmark's new plant-based policy. And I was quite surprised that when they asked who knew about it, very few people put their hands up. Had I known that, I would have put more slides on here about that. But it really is an incredibly significant political change that's taken place at government level, at parliamentary level, and we can achieve the same things here. So, from a policy point of view, before the election, we put together a manifesto which was giving an overview of the kind of changes that would be needed. Remember, our job is to help and support vegans. And in practice, what that means is that anything which makes it easier, more attractive to consume vegan food, to eat plant-based foods, is good for vegans and veganism, and by extension, animals. Anything which is going to make people understand the benefits of it better, anything that's going to clear away the barriers, and there are plenty of barriers out there, as you know. So this policy manifesto was put together to talk about the kinds of things, the kinds of practical policies which government might be interested in, which the government can implement, which will help to move things forward, essentially in making it easier and things that will help people to move towards eating more plant-based foods. Obviously, we all want people to go 100% vegan, but actually progressing in that direction, obviously, is very beneficial. And these are the broad themes here, and we have copies of this here. Please do take them. We have more detailed copies online, which go into much more detail about those kind of policies. And I will actually come back to this slide later, but I hope if you actually can, you all read that. It might be a little bit small at the back. I'll just run through it. First of all, promote plant-based diets for net zero. We've already heard about the importance and relevance of the environmental arguments there, and that is, as one of the speakers earlier said, it's one of our great routes for progress there. Capitalize on economic growth of the plant-based sector. The Green Alliance did some work in 2023, which is looking at the potential of, I think it was 20,000 jobs could arise in the innovative plant-based sector in technological developments there. Set a target to reduce meat and dairy consumption. Sounds radical, actually. Many organizations are already supporting this, including the Climate Change Committee, but many other organizations which are not vegan, which don't even have their primary interest as being animals, still agreeing with this. Prioritize health and sustainability in procurement. The government and public bodies provide enormous numbers of meals to people, both people having those options to eat those meals. That helps to normalize vegan food, but also importantly, the buying power of government helps to open up the markets, helps to give people who are producing those foods somewhere to sell to, which is very important. And lastly, support animal farming to transition to plant-based farming. We all know that the government has done an appalling job with farmers so far, has antagonized them considerably, and there's a talk from Kerry from Vegan Support to Farmers, I think later today, which I'm sure will be really interesting. We all support farming, we all support food, and those people who are producing the kind of food that we in this room don't support, they want to make a living, they have a right to make a living, and helping that transition is something that's very important. We want to be working with farmers, not against them. And these are just some examples of some policy asks that we have, but I'm conscious of time, I'm not going to list them all just now. But things where policymakers can make a difference, which is going to again, help that process of people going and staying vegan. So what I just wanted to talk about just now is, okay, that's the big picture. In practice, how does veganism kind of interact with government? Well, I actually started at the Vegan Society 2 days after the general election. One of my first jobs was to look at, we've got all these new MPs, we've got these new government ministers, we need to get in contact with them, we need to put our arguments in front of them. And what I found was just an absolutely enormous list of MPs and of government departments. And these all overlap with veganism. So obvious one, health, we all know about the health benefits, so Department of Health and Social Services. If anyone was here earlier, the brilliant talk that was done by Sam from Humane World for Animals about the civil service. She was also talking about the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which is the nominal home for what we do, that food is their area, environment is their area, and farming is their area. Animal protection in most forms is their area, though animal testing, which is of course an issue that vegans are very interested in, is actually managed by the Home Office, so that's another department. But then plant-based businesses, trade deals, that's Department for Business and Trade. Alternative proteins, we were talking about before, Department for Science, Business and Innovation. And just earlier this year, National Alternative Protein Innovation Center launched. That's a government investment in developing new forms of protein. That does unfortunately include insects at the moment, but primarily and overwhelmingly this is plant-based protein. This is something that the government, actually the previous government, put in train, but which is a very positive thing. School food training and education. We have an education officer at the Vegan Society who is always busy, always proactively looking at the issues that arise in this area. And vegans' rights, Ministry of Justice. Veganism is a protected characteristic under equalities law. Not all vegans are having that those rights respected, and this is another thing that the Vegan Society gets involved in helping with that. And I could have added there, of course, the Treasury, which is actually one of the most important, but not ones, a ministry that we lobby directly very much. And what I do want to very much talk about here, or at least alert you to, is the government's plan for a new food strategy. Could I just ask who is aware of that in this room? Okay, not bad. Back in December, Steve Reed, who is the Minister, the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, announced that this government would be developing a food strategy over the coming year. Things then went very, very quiet after that. We waited 3 months before we had any more information about what that would involve, and we have just had some information about that. It's not a brilliant start. There is an advisory board which is going to oversee the process of developing this strategy. It is heavily dominated by industry, including factory farmers, Cranswick, who are responsible for applications for mega factory farms, pig and chicken farms in Norfolk, are on the board of the advisory board. So we've got a little bit of an uphill struggle there, but there's more that we can do about that. And this is important because here in 2021, the previous government commissioned someone externally, Henry Dimbleby, who founded Leon, to go and develop a food strategy which is supposed to fix all these problems we have with a food system which we know makes people unhealthy, is bad for the environment, people can't afford it, all these problems. Henry Dimbleby went away and developed this food strategy, spoke to everyone. Pretty much everyone thought that this document was brilliant. Obviously, it didn't call for veganism, but it calls for meat reduction. It calls for more investment in plant-based food. Everybody loved it, apart from the government, who essentially threw it in the bin. We cannot let that happen again. This is our critical opportunity. If we can get plant-based embedded in the new food strategy, then so much good will flow from that. And ourselves and lots of other people, including our colleagues at Humane World International and others, are working on that even as we speak. So we cannot let this food strategy go the way of the last one. So that's a lot of context. Now we'll look at, okay, what's the relationship that all of us directly have, those of us who are, obviously someone like myself and others in our team have different forms of access and involvement with policymakers, but all of us have an MP. But in engaging with that MP, I think the first thing we need to understand is, okay, what are they doing? And some of these things are obvious, but they're not all obvious. So think about the pressures on them. And this is, I know you all know this, but MPs work incredibly hard. MPs have very limited time. And whether or not you support your particular MP politically, have no doubt that they are working very, very hard. There. And these are the things they do. First of all, scrutinize and voting on laws. That's one of their core responsibilities. But not every policy change comes through law. So there are other factors there. Critically represent constituency and constituents on local issues in these ways. And we know that local issues can be very relevant to our causes. We talked about factory farms in Norfolk just now, the health and schools, the state of the hospitals, what people are being offered to eat in hospitals, other parliamentary business of various kinds. Then they do stuff outside Parliament. They attend events, talk to media, party business. They are obviously talking to their political parties. They all manage an office, or at least are responsible for staff, for employing those staff, for what their staff do. That is work in itself. I can tell you that as of now, of March 2025, not all MPs have a telephone number in the House of Commons. If you want to get in contact with them, you have to find out their personal phone number or email them. It's pretty appalling that that's the infrastructure with which they have to work, and we have to be understanding about that. And then the one at the bottom, really crucial, the other thing they want is to try and get re-elected. They have job insecurity, and most of them will want to be elected again, and that's very important for them, keeping their electors happy. So that's what MPs in general do, but then what does your MP do? And this is very important if we're talking to them. There's lots of different roles that they can have, sort of starting at the top. Obviously, if they're a cabinet minister, fantastic, they have influence, but that also makes them very busy. A junior minister can also be obviously very useful, particularly if they're in an area which is relevant. And what we established earlier on is there's a huge range of areas which are relevant to veganism and animal rights. Of course, if they're not in the government, then there are spokespeople for the other main parties, the shadow cabinet, and for the other parties as well. The Liberal Democrats have 70 MPs now. That's a pretty influential group. Parliamentary private secretary, that's someone who essentially helps a minister, but they have some access there. And then a couple of the more obscure ones. Select committees are committees of MPs whose job is to scrutinize the work of government. And they are dedicated to a particular department. And there's usually about 12 MPs on any committee. And I mentioned before, not all policy change is laws. Some policy change is simply a change in what's taking place within the ministry. Select committees can call ministers in. We've seen them on the television, can demand that they answer questions. Select committees produce reports on issues saying the government is not doing this well enough. And this will very often be select committees whose chair is a member of the party that's in government. They are very independently minded. They are very influential. If one of your MPs is on a select committee, then that is a very, very useful situation to have. And lastly, all parliamentary groups, they are informal groups of MPs from different parties who have a particular interest in a subject. So it might be animal welfare, it might be health, in other ways it might be relevant. APPGs can sometimes just be talking shops, but sometimes they produce reports, and they can act as a caucus that advance a particular issue. So there's lots of ways in which your MP can contribute. Just within Parliament, there are a number of things they can do to raise our issues. Written and oral questions, where they ask questions of the government, which the government has to answer. The fact that the government has to answer it doesn't mean they will give a useful answer, but they will. But nevertheless, even asking a question lets the government know that there is political interest, that there is public interest, and it's a very straightforward thing for MPs to do. Speaking in debates, again, it's an opportunity just to get those words, plant-based, vegan, those issues there, and many debates can be relevant. We had a meeting with MPs, and 2 days afterwards, there was a debate on obesity. We were able to get some talking points to those MPs, and one of the MPs raised the value of plant-based diets in that context. He isn't even vegan, he isn't even vegetarian, but through that connection, we were able to get that raised there. Adjournment and backbench debates are just essentially a different way, not debates which are related directly to government policy, but again, and as you'll know, everything that's said in the House gets recorded there. Committees we spoke about before, as well as select committees, there are also committees for bills. So when laws are passing through Parliament, then a number of MPs scrutinise those bills. So if you're, and then once the bill goes, the MP stops working on it. But again, if your MP is on one of these bill committees, then they have influence at that point. And I already mentioned all parliamentary groups. I've got ahead of myself. There we are. Select committees we've spoken about, bill committees we've spoken about, and APPGs we've spoken about. So go a little further there. So those are all the things your MP might be doing. The question is, how do you find out what your MP is doing? And your best source is here, the Parliament's website. If you Google your MP, the parliamentary thing will come up within the first 2 results. Just look for Parliament, and it takes you to this page. And this page gives you a huge amount of information. I appreciate you won't be able to read all of this at the moment, but parliamentary career, when were they elected, what roles do they have, their voting record, what have they voted on, speaking written questions that they have submitted. So you can get a sense, what are they interested in? If you look at their written questions and they're talking about issues to do with farming or health or those kinds of things, then they have an interest there. So absolutely the first place to go to would be the parliamentary website, which obviously also has their contact details on as well, and will tell you if they have any role, if they're on, if they are, on an old parliamentary group, if they are the a part of the Secretariat for that. But if they're on any committees or that sort of thing, that's all on this page. But there are other routes as well. This is They Work For You, which is not directly related to Parliament, but which also provides very useful information. I picked Jeremy Corbyn just because he used to be my MP. He's also vegan, to the best of our knowledge. There, and this also provides more information about how they vote, and it also gives you an opportunity as well to get in contact with them. And as you can see on the profile there, it gives you their social media profiles, which is obviously another very good way of getting to know them. Such as Dr. Ben Spencer, who is a new MP who was elected recently. He's a Tory MP, Shadow Minister for Mental Health, as you see there. Following his social media, I learned a number of things about Ben Spencer, and I have to admit, I feel quite sorry for him when I look at this picture. This man is a former medical doctor. He probably didn't get into politics to have pictures of himself doing a thumbs down while sitting in a paddling pool, but that picture is saying he's concerned about the state of parks and things in his constituency, so it's doing a job. He's probably not the most interested in level crossing delays either, but these are things that his constituents care about and which he therefore has to care about. It's part of his job, and it's just a reminder, of the range that they have. But also, again, obviously, I picked Ben Spencer at random. When you go through their social media, it will again give you an indication. If they go to meetings in Parliament, they'll probably put a photograph up saying, I was at this meeting. So that gives you some idea of what they might be interested in. Moving away from MPs directly, there are other routes by which we can influence government. Policy papers and consultations. Again, if you weren't here, I very highly recommend Sam Magol from Humane World International, Humane World for Animals, as you now are, thank you, talk earlier on about working with the civil service, in which he talks in more detail about consultations. But this is where the government seeks expert opinion or public opinion on particular changes that they may be thinking of introducing. That sometimes these things are very technical, sometimes they're much more accessible. As Katie will probably talk about a little bit in the community network for the Vegan Society, when we find consultations which we think might be useful for our members to support them, we can offer them guidance in how they can contribute to that. These are open to absolutely anyone. Just simply putting something in is not necessarily the right thing to do, but if you can actually make a useful argument, it does make a difference there. And again, you can follow not just the Vegan Society, but other organisations may also report on those kinds of developments. We haven't got a huge amount of time to talk about councils, but of course councils are very important because they are responsible for services. And we talked earlier on about procurement, about food, for instance, and this is work that we did a couple of years ago, looking at the provision of food for vegans within different councils, and produced this map here, where, as I'm sure you can work out, the ones marked green are pretty good, the ones marked red are not so good. So if you live in one of those red places, then there's a problem there which you can engage your councillors with. And again, we can find out about our councillors. We're fortunate to live in a very transparent system on websites, which will tell us who our councillors are. We can't normally get as much information as we can about MPs, but a little bit of sleuthing can turn some stuff up. And also just to say within that context, again, at the moment, because largely we're focusing on the food strategy, we are not doing a lot of work with councils, but there are other organisations which do, such as Plant-Based Treaty, Plant-Based Councils. As always, any vegan question, approach us, and we can certainly offer advice on those things. But if you want to work with councils who do have influence over important things, look around. Again, other organisations, other animal protection organisations, other food organisations may also be working and offer opportunities for getting in contact with councillors there. And with that, I will hand over to Katie.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'd really just like to talk now about some actual tangible and practical things that we can all do to influence our MP and to actually enforce change. I know that personally, I've been disillusioned in the past with MPs, with policy. I'm sure many of us have. I've been getting involved with personal activism for decades now. Since I was a teenager, I've had times where I've had an MP who didn't reply to me whatsoever, who replied with very generic standard responses, and I felt like I just couldn't make any difference. But since being in this role for the last 2 years, I've really seen the power that individuals have, how we can really affect policy both as individuals and collectively. So everybody in this room, everybody who's a vegan in the UK, put together, we can really influence policy in a really positive way. I just want to first of all echo what Alistair said, in that MPs can work anything from 40 to 80 hours a week. They are human. Sometimes we don't feel like they are. Some of them don't act like it. They have a lot of pressures, and they often need to respond to last-minute events, deadlines. And it can just be good to bear this in mind when we're trying to cut through the noise in getting in contact with them and standing out from other people who might be writing to them. Most do want to make a difference, at least in some areas. So I think the first thing for anybody to do who wants to lobby their MP is to be aware of what their MP's interests are. So if that MP has spoken in Parliament or has on the parliamentary website as one of their interests, it could be animal testing, it could be farming, it could be plant-based meals in schools, there could be something that has anything to do with veganism and animal rights that we can really tee into and start writing to them initially on that topic, just to get their attention and just to get that discourse going with them. I think that's really important, first of all. The other thing that we want to do is when we make an ask, make sure it's really clear and to the point. So that ask could be to commit to a position, say on phasing out animal testing. It could be to table questions for us in Parliament. So as Alistair said, those things go on record, or it could even be to attend an event that the Vegan Society or another organisation is holding within Parliament. So for example, I'd say about a couple of times a year, we host an event in Parliament, which is absolutely brilliant, because if you do it within Parliament, you've got a much higher chance of an MP attending that, because they don't have to travel anywhere. The likelihood is a lot of them will be in Parliament that day to do other things anyway. So if you hold an event within Parliament, they can just drop in and out. You can give them your resources, you can make that ask of them, and you can kind of do that face to face, and it makes a massive difference. So, for example, what our volunteers do is when we hold an event in Parliament, they'll all write to their MPs, invite them to those events, and their MPs will then come along and be engaged with the Vegan Society. And that lets us know which MPs might be vegan, vegetarian, which are interested in animal rights, which maybe are the other end of the spectrum, and we probably just don't want to bother with that much, because we're probably not going to change their worldviews and their ethical views at all. And it's really good for us to keep a record of what every MP's stance is. So making the ask really clear and to the point, and thinking about how you can get through to them, whether that's via email or in person, I think is really key. Personalising the message is really important as well. So on some of the chairs and at the front, if you haven't got some, I've provided an example of how we might write to MPs. And when we ask volunteers to write to MPs, we'll provide them with the research, we'll provide them with a draft, but we'll highlight parts that we really want them to amend themselves and put their own story in there. So for example, if you're writing about the NHS and providing more plant-based and healthier options within the NHS setting, you might talk about how your health has improved as a vegan since you've gone vegan. You might talk about how you've been in hospital and you've not had a vegan option at all. Just thinking a way of working your own story into that will help the MP to see that you're not kind of filling in a form online. We've probably all seen them. You just autofill your name and your email address and you press send and it sends an email to your MP. I think those can be great when a really high volume of people do it. But if you're sending a personal email to your MP, it's always much more likely to get looked at and responded to if you're showing them that, one, you're a constituent of theirs, and two, you've personalised it in some way that they're thinking, oh, this person hasn't just done this off a website because an organisation told them to. They actually care enough about this issue to write their own story in there. So personalising the message is really important. And thinking about being personable, telling the story makes you a bit more personable. And MPs do get a lot of emails, as you can imagine, complaining about things like potholes, the state of the roads, X, Y, Z. And I think being personable rather than being accusing is just a nice, refreshing email for them to receive, and they're much more likely to get into a positive discourse with you that way. The other thing that you can do is ask others in your area who have the same MP to do the same thing and write a similar email. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking those people need to be fellow vegans. They don't. You might have someone, you know, who's vegetarian or just cares about animal testing. They might not be vegan, but they might care about that topic, or maybe be a family member who sees that you care about it, so they're willing to write too. The more volume of the same thing that an MP receives, the better, really. It shows that strength in numbers. And then the most important thing that I've seen since starting this role at the Vegan Society is the repetition. Often we'll fire an email off to an MP and we'll expect them to reply. And then when we don't, we kind of just give up and we think, I'm never going to write to them again. They're not interested. Maybe that their staff or themselves have just missed your email. And I've actually found that the kind of joy and the success is in the follow-up. So when I write an email to my MP and when the volunteers do, I always get them to set themselves a little reminder for 2 or 3 weeks' time to then go back to their MP if they haven't responded and just re-forward that email and say, hey, you haven't responded yet. I'd really like to know your thoughts on this. When you get a second, can you respond to me? And often that will make them sit up more and think, okay, I will actually respond to this. So they're waiting for my response. I better do it because they're my constituents. And MPs do have to respond to their constituents. So you are absolutely within your right to kind of re-forward that email back on and say, you know, hey, listen to me. I've got something to say here. I'd like to know your view on this, or I'd like you to do this on my behalf. Will you do it? So really the repetition and follow-up is absolutely key. They do get a lot of generic copy and paste kind of, will you sign this petition? Will you agree to this stance? So when they see that you're actually writing from your email address, it makes a whole difference. And then the last thing really, just from probably mine and our policy team's view, is if you ever write to your MP based on one of our campaigns or one of the asks we've got out there, we'd just love to really know how you get on with that. And if you do receive a response from your MP, on the draft email sheets, there's a QR code on the back with all the resources from today on, but also our contact details. So if you receive a response from your MP, whether it's positive or negative, we always like to see those things because then we can see what that particular MP stance is. Sometimes it's really hard for us as an organisation to kind of get a response from an MP, and much easier for a constituent. So just knowing what that MP has as a view on whatever it might be is really helpful for us as well. We've kind of added to our running list, don't we, Alistair, of who an MP is, what their interests are, if they're if they're favourable to the vegan cause or not. I'm ready for the next slide. So I think just in summary, really, make it concise, make it really clear what you're asking for. So don't just send a kind of a moaning email. Make sure you've got an ask in there, that it's really clear what you're wanting from them. Make sure you're polite, make it specific, make it relevant to their interests if at all possible. And then the last thing really is just to meet them in person if you can, or if our team are, say, holding an event at Parliament to get somebody within a vegan related organisation to meet them in person if you can. Most MPs hold in-person surgeries monthly or bi-monthly. It can depend on the MP, but you can find all that info on their website. Usually you can sign up to like a newsletter from the MP as well, find out when they're taking appointments in person, and then then you've got them cornered and you're going to get a response from them. They can't escape from you like they can an email. So that's, if you've got something you're really passionate about, that's always a really, really good way to pin them down. That's what I did with my old MP, who was terrible at responding to any kind of email. I pinned her down that way in the end, and then she couldn't escape. So that was really good. Next one, Alistair. Yeah, I'm nearly done. So this is really just what you've got in front of you, which I've already really talked about, just an example of the kind of thing we ask our community network to do, our volunteers and people just generally who come across our website is to write those kind of emails, but really add in their own experience and personalise it just a little bit. And things like that really do take less than 5 minutes, and it's well worth doing those little adaptations. Yeah. So how our volunteers fit in with this? I think it's really important to know that local communities are really important. They're starting to see the vegan movement as something happening in their area, people are, rather than just, oh, there's a pocket of vegans here, there. From new businesses to families to councillors, many people are needing support, whether they're going vegan or are already vegan. So it could be finding the correct information, being catered for in a hospital, MPs, like we're talking about today, listening to their vegan constituents, and even knowing that maybe they've got a good handful of vegan constituents in their area that they should listen to. So because local issues can be a little bit more unique and varied than national issues, our local volunteers really enable us to share those messages and our campaigns on that local level, and means that us as an organisation then can get a bit of an in with a specific MP should we want to. So I think that's really important. Next one, Alistair, please. So this is really just a graphic about what our volunteers do and how lobbying MPs and other policymakers is just one part of the picture, really. So by meeting with your MP about a vegan issue, they then might table that in Parliament. Businesses may also listen because of that. They may see vegan events happening in your area. And all of this really just goes together to kind of holistically represent vegan activism and how policy works in that grand scope of things. Yeah. So before I finish off, I just wanted to kind of give an example. I don't know if you can read many of those, but some wins that we've had. Some of these are from last year. Just that we've kind of had veganism becoming a protected characteristic by law. I know that a lot of you, well, probably most of you will know about that, but that was really all kick-started by one person's legal case. So that really does show that the power that one person absolutely can have to make a difference, and that applies to the rest of policy too. Advocacy is really powerful. So we've got letters here from MPs meeting our policy team, an MP taking an issue to the Secretary of State on our behalf. You might remember a few years ago that the government revoked the ban on animal testing, and then kind of following the uproar in response to that decision, the government U-turned and confirmed that it had banned the issuing of licenses for animal testing of chemicals used as ingredients in cosmetic products. And this year they have announced that they're putting a new strategy together to phase out animal testing completely. So that is something that all of us as individuals can keep an eye on to see, because we've got really vague details about that at the moment, but apparently that's coming out this year. So us keeping an eye on that, making sure our MPs are aware of that and representing us as constituents, and that it's at the forefront of our mind, will be something really key for this year. And then there's just some really nice smaller things as well. So we had a volunteer called Jane who did a vegan community lunch down in Weymouth. It was attended by the mayor, a local councillor. They'd never eaten, well, I'm sure they had eaten a vegan meal before, but they said they'd never eaten a vegan meal before. I'm sure they had beans on a jacket potato in their life, but you know what people can be like. They said they'd never had a vegan meal before, and after that they said they'd start eating more vegan food. They really enjoyed the food that was out there, and it really just got Jane kind of some FaceTime with her mayor and her councillor, and that was just a really nice little thing that happened within our community network. And then we've had MPs that have been attending our events purely due to our volunteers writing to them and asking them to attend. And then that means that our policy team have got to speak to those MPs where they haven't before. So that's been really great. Yeah, last slide, I think now. So I did put on the first couple of rows. If you haven't got one, there's some bits and pieces to take on the way out. A copy of a draft email that you can really scan the QR code, get the electronic copy, amend it, and within 5 minutes you're already opening that discourse with your MP. It's a great way to start talking to your MP if you haven't done that before. There's also support available from us on that QR code and my contact details. Anybody who needs support with writing to their MP or isn't quite sure what to say or wants a draft email looking over, I'm here to support with that. That's absolutely fine. And if you do get a response, I'll just reiterate, send it on to us, whether it's positive or negative. We'd really love to see it. Yeah, I think we're done. One thing.
Yeah, slightly premature there. This is because I added this slide literally this morning without Katie knowing it. Yes, exactly. So I talked about the food strategy earlier on. This is absolutely critical time for us to get positive changes. There is a petition that's just been published on the parliamentary website. Dale Vince, the Ecotricity founder, is the first name on it. He submitted it, but we and some other organizations work with him on this. This petition is about promoting plant-based foods over meat and dairy for a healthier Britain. A parliamentary petition, if it gets 10,000 signatures, forces a response from the government. If it gets, oh, look at that, fantastic. Please sign, please encourage as many other people as possible to sign as soon as possible, because the more signatures we get on this, then obviously the more persuasive that is for government. So that's an action you can all take, thanks to the Hoover Act, and thank you, Joe, on that. Thank you, that's up. That is now us, thank you. Thanks.
So, amazing talk, as you'd all agree, everybody. I'm just going to ask a few questions from the Hoover App, if that's okay to you both. So the first question is, what is the best way to get attention of MPs and councillors, especially if we're not in their constituency, through their parliamentary address, you covered that, via intermediary contact or inviting them to an event? Yeah.
I would firstly say, if you're not in their constituency, then generally speaking, I wouldn't even try. I think MPs are incredibly busy, and if it's a local issue, they're actually not supposed to respond to someone from anywhere else. If they belong to a committee, then things like the petition that we just talked about just now, but don't try and get in touch with them in that way. Certainly, inviting MPs to events, great idea if you can meet them in person, but again, they're all incredibly busy. Most of them are not spending time in their constituencies apart from during recess. Personal contact, absolutely great. If anyone else has worked with them, if anyone else, any of your friends on any other issue, then that's certainly a really good way to doing it. Surgeries are there in order to do that, but yeah, that's the quick answer to that.
Thank you. Thanks. How to make progress over time with one representative, from smaller requests like please write to a minister to bigger requests like please table a written question and please ask a question in Parliament.
It's case by case. Obviously, one thing that we have at the moment, we talked before, we've got 350 brand new MPs. They're just starting to find their feet at the moment. They're just starting to figure out what they prioritise, and that really is critical for MPs on what they prioritise. As Katie talked about, patients, we don't want, this is obvious, we don't want to be inundating them with a new request every week, but if we can be targeted on the kind of thing that we're asking them, patiently going back, following up, eventually we may find in some cases that our MP is just a dead end, and that's just a fact of life, certainly. But don't write them off, and particularly don't write them off because of their politics or because of other things that they may have said, unless they're very explicit, because we're not just talking to them about vegan issues. There's likely to be something, health, environment, something like that they're interested in, which if you find the right angle, you might get a response. Yeah, and that's a really good point, as we spoke about before. With all these new MPs, most of them, we don't absolutely know what they're interested in at the moment. If you've got a new MP, then getting their attention is very much worthwhile. And how long it may take for them to decide. We know the very first vegan MP, Kerry McCarthy, elected 20 odd years ago, did not want to be the vegan MP. I worked in a vegan organization at the time. She said, I don't want to be known for that thing. In fact, as the years went by, she became far more active in issues related to veganism, but she didn't feel that was right for her at that time. We know that there are some new MPs who also feel that's not the right thing for them at this time, but it doesn't mean they won't.
That's brilliant. One more question. What do you think is the use of early day motions, and how we can progress them once they are proposed?
Early day motions, really the only value of early day motions, which is essentially a petition signed by parliamentarians. Claire, my boss, was there to say if you disagree, but is that it tells you that your MP is interested in something if they signed an early day motion. In terms of putting pressure on the government and making change, it very rarely makes a difference. Lots of MPs do not sign EDMs as a point of principle, so it means that all of them can only ever go so far there. So, but very useful in understanding your MP. If they have signed them, then great. But in terms of a lobbying strategy, it's not one that I think these days is particularly useful.
That's great. Thank you, Alistair. If we could give our speakers another round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question linked to point 5 of your political manifesto. Recognize the rights of all animals to live. Nice. Does a personalized message to a MP is sufficient to implement a constitutional revolution? Thank you.
I would just say about that, you never know, as Katie said, what's going to come from a contact with MPs. It's always most useful because they're busy to think about what they're interested in, but we also shouldn't be, afraid necessarily say what we think and what our values are.
Brilliant. Thank you both, and much appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, clap again if you want. Yeah, all good.